Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 6 of the Caught by Happy podcast. Today on the show, I am speaking with my very own uncle. Yes, my Uncle Clint, my father's brother. I am talking to him for a couple of reasons, but the most important one being that it is Veterans Day, or very close to Veterans Day. And although I do know a handful of people who have served in the military or are currently serving in the military or have served in a war, my uncle just happened to be the guy who was most available to come over and speak to me today. No, but really, I did want to hear from him because I don't know, I only know one or two other men who were in the Vietnam conflict, and he's the one I am, of course, closest with. And I wanted to find out why, in the first place, he even joined the Marines. There's a bit of a family backstory here. I don't really know too much about my father's side of the family, what it was like for them as kids growing up. I don't really know what it was like for my grandfather on my father's side or my grandmother on my father's side, what it was like for them growing up, what their families were like. I don't know too much of the family history other than some of the genealogical research that my brother has done. So we've got names and some pictures, and we've got locations of where the family lived. But for the most part, I'm much more knowledgeable about my mother's side of the family. So getting to sit down with my uncle and talk about some of the history of my father's side of the family kind of filled in a few gaps for me. There's a lot of stuff that I still would like to know about, and maybe that's sitting down having a beer with my dad and my uncle and some other people, some cousins. Or maybe it's just one of those things. Maybe it's just one of those things that's better left in the past. Maybe we don't talk about it, maybe we don't bring it up anymore. I just feel like there's a lot of stories that are untold. And I try to get to a little bit of it with my uncle, but we don't dig too deep into it. Not anything super personal or anything like that. I don't know a lot about my grandfather, and I don't know why my grandfather was the way he was, at least the way that I knew him. Not exactly the most warm and fuzzy guy, to say the least. And I think most people in my family would attest to that. But, anyways, we're going to talk to my uncle. We're going to find out about why he joined the Marine Corps, what his experience was like in Vietnam. But before that, we had Mancation 2019. I took a bunch of friends from Richmond and we drove up to New York, where my family is, and we went to a Buffalo Sabres game. We went to a Bills game. We went to Devil's Hole and walked around the Niagara Gorge. We had some amazing, delicious food. Of course, I took them to get some wings. We went to Duff's because that is like the spot you have to go to get wings in Western New York. Now, there is one place that I have still not tried, and that's Gabriel's Gate. It's a place that is on the list as the number one or number two place in all of Western New York. They're apparently the place that has the best wings. I just haven't, the stars have not aligned enough for me to get there and order some wings. So next time I go up, when I go up in the summer, definitely going to Gabriel's Gate to check that out. But since we were all kind of in the area and we were driving around and they had to get some wings somewhere, I thought Duff's was an excellent choice. They are my favorite wing. I know there's a little bit of debate online about where the best buffalo wing is, and Duff's may now be a little bit touristy, according to some, but I don't care. I think they're the best. Best wing sauce, best crispness to juiciness ratio. If you ever go up to Western New York, I think Duff's needs to be on your list as at least in the top 5 spots that you need to go check out to find out what real wings, buffalo style wings, buffalo wings, or as Buffalonians call them, wings, what they're supposed to be like. And like I said, when I go up there again in the summer and I get to Gabriel's Gate and I get to Bar Bill's Tavern, I get to some of these other places that I have yet to try, I'll let you know how they stack up. But the vacation, the little mini trip was great. We went to a Sabres game, which was quite boring because they played the most boring game ever against the Islanders and lost 1-0. It happened every time I go up there and I go to a hockey game. I just happen to see a loss and a boring game. I love hockey. I love the Buffalo Sabres. It's something about me. When I go up there or when I go to a game, I in person, I always just happen to see the wrong one. But luckily, we got to go to a Bills game and see a win. Now, it was super cold, but I assume that you guys all have heard of Bills Mafia. Bills Mafia is all over Barstool, all over Instagram. You know, it's the people jumping through tables, taking shots out of bowling balls, and my friends wanted to see that. And guess what? We got to see that. We first met up with another friend of mine who's from the Richmond area. Actually, he's down in Chesapeake now, but he goes up to every home game, and we got to go to a low-key tailgate, a real chill tailgate where people were just eating, drinking, having a good time. You know, we got a little rowdy, but nothing crazy. And then we walked over to Hammer's Lot. And if you don't know who Pinto Ron is, you got to look him up. Do a Google search for Pinto Ron. He's a staple of Bill's Mafia. He's been doing this for almost 30 years, I think. They grill on his red Pinto. They're actually making food and cooking and grilling on the Pinto. We got Pizza Pete over there making pizzas in a filing cabinet. I mean, it's a great time. It's world renowned. It's the best tailgating atmosphere. And then, of course, the ketchup and mustard show when Pinto Ron will get doused in ketchup and mustard, and then everybody just crowds around him, taking pictures and selfies with him. And that kicks off every single home game. And it's such a great atmosphere to be at. You know, we saw a couple people jumping through tables like idiots, but that's what my friends wanted to see. They're from Richmond, and they know when they go up to a Bills tailgate now, that's where they find the crazy stuff in the Hammers Lot. But for me, you know what? I think I'm done with that. I think I've seen enough of it. I grew up with it. I'm ready to just, you know, pull out my camping chair and sit down and grill a hot dog and start to enjoy the relaxing, sit on my butt and drink beer type of tailgate. But for me, for my money, for what it's worth, there's nothing like going to a Buffalo Bills game and doing the whole tailgating experience. It's really a one-of-a-kind type of experience. And if you haven't done it, if you're a football fan, not if you're a Bills fan, but if you're a football fan, when your team is playing the Bills up in Orchard Park, New York, get up there and take it in. It's just one of those types of experiences that I don't think is very common anymore in the league. Maybe out in Green Bay or some of those older outdoor stadiums. But I mean, this is just old school football. It's like a place out of time. It really is. And with these dome stadiums or downtown stadiums, you just don't get the same type of atmosphere. And you know, some people will say that atmosphere needs to go away, and some people will say that it's the greatest type of football atmosphere. I think it's amazing, and it's a rare experience that you just can't get at many other stadiums nowadays. So if you're a football fan, if you're an NFL fan, you got to get up to Orchard Park before they eventually build a new stadium, probably downtown. All right, now that I've alienated all of you people who are not football fans or Buffalo Bills fans, I guess we're going to get right into the podcast. By the way, look, we're 6 episodes in. I want to do about 6 to 8 more, and maybe I'll keep it going for even longer if we can. So if you have a story, I want to know about some of the stuff that's happened in your life that is maybe kind of dark, maybe not great. Maybe it's bad news. Maybe you came from a bad place, but you turned it around. You built something out of a pile of nothing. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear that you're doing something great, that you're doing something that you love. I want to know how you did it. And I want to know why you are the way that you are. That's my goal of this podcast. So if you have a story you want to tell, please email me at caughtbyhappy@gmail.com or DM me on one of my social accounts such as Instagram or Facebook. And be sure to subscribe and listen and tell your friends. We're building the audience with every episode I post, and I hope to keep doing a lot more of these, all right? Fantastic. All right, here we go. We're going to talk to Clint Harrington, the one and only Uncle Clint. Okay, Uncle Clint.
Hi, Matt.
First of all, happy birthday.
Thank you.
You just turned
70.
70 years old.
Yes.
And you do not look a day over 65.
Well, it's really easy. I married an Italian who said if I ever looked old, she'd kill me. So this is a better way to go.
You feel good?
Yeah, I feel great. I mean, you know, get a little sore after playing golf for 3 or 4 days a week, but other than that, it's all good.
Is that what you do now?
I do, yeah. Yeah, really.
Well, I brought you on the podcast today because we are talking about Veterans Day.
Yes.
Because Veterans Day is here, and you are a veteran. So I wanted to talk to you about your experience in Vietnam. But before we get into that, The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is just about your childhood and growing up with my dad, because I really don't know a lot of these stories about what it was like when you guys were kids. And I've heard some stories over the years from Dad and from you about Grandpa Harrington and your brother, Dennis, who passed away back in the 80s.
1990.
Oh, 1990 was
1990, yeah.
Okay.
It was the year we moved over here.
it? Okay. So tell me where you were born.
I was born October 28th, 1949, in Niagara Falls.
So what was it like growing up in the Falls?
Well, we lived in a community. It was one of those where everybody walked to school in the snow uphill, that all the
Yeah.
time. Not really, but it was it was one of those ones that you spend all the time outside playing and enjoying your friends and football, baseball, and all that crazy stuff out in the street, riding your bicycles, and it was as safe as could be.
Did you grow up in that house that was across the street or diagonal from Page's?
No,
No. Where did you?
I grew up
First-
in Lacelle.
Oh, you did?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who lived in the house by Page's?
My grandfather, your great grandfather, Walt's house, Teresa and Walter's house.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't never met them. They must have passed before I was born.
Oh yeah, Walter passed in '67, and
Oh,
Teresa,
yeah.
I think, passed just before that.
What
Yeah,
were they
so-
like? Did you know them?
I knew them somewhat well. I used to. Mom used to drop me off over there to go to catechism, and I'd walk through the field and sit there with Walt, and he'd make me a hot dog. And showed me the best way to make a hot dog. It was you bring the water to a boil, drop the hot dogs in, and leave them in there for 10 minutes. I mean, that was his way of doing it,
You couldn't fire a grill up?
Nope. Nope.
And you also had a hot dog place across the street?
Had a hot dog place across the street, yeah. We had the best hot dog place across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody knows what a whistle pig is.
No, Whistle Pig. I mean, it was
It was
it's
a hot dog, either red or white,
Yep.
and it was wrapped in bacon,
Yep.
and then they put cheese over it.
Yeah. And then if you want a pig boat, they put it in a little plastic boat
Yeah.
and they put a little American flag in it.
And they had the whistle pig inside the door as you walked into the place.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That
Now,
place, it's gone
You
now,
probably
right?
don't remember Six Corners.
No.
That was Six Corners. There
Before,
were 6 corners coming up there.
on Military and
Military, Packard Road, and Porter Road.
No, I don't.
Yeah, it was 6 corners, yeah.
Oh wow.
And they had gas stations on almost every corner, and they had price wars of the gas stations. I remember the one price war was 25 cents a gallon. Because in high school, we would put all our change together, get $1 worth of gas, and go cruising.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
No.
No, but Pages, I remember that place when I was a kid. My parents used to take me there and all the rides, the little helicopter rides and the boat rides, all that stuff. And when you would walk into the restaurant area, there was that big pig.
The big pig.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then the separate house was the ice cream place where you got the ice cream.
Yep.
And I used
Custard.
to
Custard. Wasn't ice cream. It was
it was
custard.
custard, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember getting the dipped custard.
Yep.
That was my favorite.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
I always got the strawberry or cherry dipped one. Yeah. But that place is gone now, I think.
They changed hands and they made it something else, and it's just not the same anymore now.
I remember I went there when I was in college once because I wanted to show some friends this place.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess was it Peter Page, the son?
Peter was the son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was his last couple of years of owning it
Okay.
back then. I remember meeting him and he remembered my father because I brought up my father's name and he said he knew my dad.
He was a little older. He was, I think, a year older than me. And in the lot there, we used to play tackle football. So I knew Pete quite well.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I knew his parents. And his parents had a place there on Packard Road and also down to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So there was Pages 1 and 2.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, I think that's where Pete ended up retiring. His parents ended up retiring down there, and then they passed away.
Yeah. Well, most people do end up leaving Western New York to retire. Some people.
It's a great place to be from.
Yeah. All right. So you're growing up in Niagara Falls in the 50s. What was that like? What were Grandpa and Grandma like back then? Because in my memory of both of them, I knew Grandma was just very, she was a tough woman, but she was very matter of fact. You know, she just kind of told it like it was. Grandpa, I really didn't know that well at all because he was very quiet. He didn't really say too much to us kids.
Didn't say too much to any of us kids. No, his thing was he was probably the biggest workaholic I knew. I mean, and but being in the old days, everybody smoked.
Yeah.
Everybody drank. I remember him going to the store after work and getting 3 quarts of beer and finishing them,
Yeah.
and that was the norm. But I never remember him missing a day of work ever
Yeah.
in his life. I mean, he was always at work.
What did he
worked as a
do?
pipe fitter at Carborundum.
Pipe fitter.
And everybody there just loved him. Kind of like you said, the home life though, he had his thing. He liked his garden. The house over on Packard Road, we had 1 acre, and they would grow everything: peanuts, popcorn, Swiss chard, tomatoes, green beans. If it was there, they tried it.
Oh wow.
And there was nothing better than picking the fresh fruit. But to us, there was nothing better than not having to work the garden. And every night after work, we'd go over and work the garden.
Yeah. So what was it like when my dad and Uncle Dennis came along?
I remember when your dad was born, I was staying with a couple cousins a few streets over because I was already in school. Yeah, and Dennis, I don't know who he stayed with at the time, but I stayed over a couple streets over. But we were all. It was in the old days. We'd do things like we would always be dressed up for Easter.
Mm-hmm.
I got pictures of all of us with our suits on, standing in the driveway.
Yeah.
And mom and dad were, typical lower middle class factory workers. There wasn't an abundance of money, but we had a new house in a small neighborhood that today is still probably one of the best and safest around.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that whole area there has really always stayed the same. Like I said, we would walk to school every day. And, mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she would cook meat, potatoes, and vegetables, unless it was your birthday.
Oh, what'd you get
and
on
your
birthday?
birthday? Whatever you wanted. And I was a spaghetti guy, so I would end up eating about 3 bowls of spaghetti.
Wow.
Yeah, and mom was a really good mentor.
Tell me about what she was like when you guys were growing up.
Yeah, she had her rules, and you had to do the dishes your night, and you could either decide to wash them or dry them, and she would do the other. So it was good quality time. I remember talking to her about a lot of things that you question when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Dad was usually pretty tired from work. He'd either be doing something, tinkering around or something. If there was something there that could be fixed, he could fix it.
Yeah.
But there wasn't, in kind of in response to you, there wasn't a lot of interaction. I think the only time I remember him ever getting involved with me, like with sports, was in Cub Scouts.
Yes.
After that, it was mom and Nina, or mom's mother.
And she died before I was born too. She must have been in the 70s because Papa was married to Marge.
To Marge,
I remember.
Yeah, and Marge was Papa's sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And she was married to Aim, which is the brother. And
were you close with that whole side then? You said you were close with her. And were you close to that whole grandma side of the family?
They were the ones that, like, whenever anything happened, they were always there.
Yeah.
Whereas Walt and Teresa and her sister, Teresa and Dad's sister, and her sister opened a store in the trailer park in the Falls when the power project was coming through.
Okay.
And Teresa was one of these people that couldn't sit still. I remember the 3 of them driving out to California, out to Mexico, and doing that kind of stuff. Walt, they never seemed like a couple to me.
Yeah. Did you call them Teresa and Walt, or did you call them Grandma and Grandpa?
I called them Grandma and Papa.
Grandma and Papa.
Yeah, both of the grandfathers were Papa.
Okay.
Nina was Nina. She was, I don't know where that came from, me probably. No, I mean, I started calling Ray probably after my grandmother died.
And Ray is your grandfather.
Is my grandfather.
My great grandfather.
And then Aim was his brother. Now,
yeah, I never met him either.
Their father was Pa, and he died when I was 2. He was about 6'6", and he was an engineer on the New York Central Railroad. And the reason I remember is because at 2 years old, the oldest memory I have is looking up at his coffin and wondering why everybody was crying.
And you were 2? I
was 2.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's the only memory I have that far back.
Right.
And then Ma was a little woman, and she was a farm railroad wife. So there was a lot of language that went back and forth when she was around.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh.
I remember seeing the picture of both of them in Papa's house because he had that old oval
Yep.
black and white photograph of them, and I think somebody's got that now. Maybe you do. Maybe my parents do. I don't know. But I've seen it. I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a lot of the old albums, but there were people that even I didn't know.
Yeah.
And the only ones I don't have pictures are Teresa and Walter.
Yeah, I think I've only seen maybe one picture that I know of. He's sitting on a lounge chair outside.
Okay.
And that came from Mark because he's got it on the Ancestry. My brother Mark.
I gave your brother the pictures of Pa's engines that he was with to donate to either New York Central or the Historic Society up there.
Oh, right.
So that when your kids go up there, you go in and you say, that was my great-great-grandfather.
Right.
Ray married your great-grandmother when she was 15.
Wow.
And he brought her into the country.
From where?
From Canada. She was from up around Quebec. So she had a lot of brothers and sisters around.
And that's Nina?
Yeah, that's Nina, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I have her immigration papers someplace. And then when they had mom, your grandmother, she was 17.
Holy cow.
So when I'd go out with Ray, older years, everybody would think he was my father.
Yeah, because how old was he? Was he that young too, or was he?
No,
a
he
little
wasn't
bit older?
that young. No, he was older than her.
Yeah, I remember him quite well because he died when I was in college. Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I one of my fondest memories is this 80th birthday, the surprise party that we had at my parents' house.
Parents' house, yeah. I wonder today because I know how I feel after I do something physical.
Yeah.
And he loved basketball. There's a picture I posted on Facebook of his basketball team way back in the 30s or 40s.
Right.
So at 80 years old at your parents' house, after we surprised him, he wanted to play basketball.
Yep.
And he ran around and played basketball.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine how he felt for the week after that.
Well, no, I remember him. I remember playing basketball, and I remember him shooting, and the ball wasn't quite getting up to the rim, and he was pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
I remember him being pretty upset about it. But he liked being out there with us while we were all playing, for sure.
Yeah. No, he was great that way. I did a lot of things with him. He was more of a father type with me.
Yeah.
And a friend. We would go golfing. We would go bowling together. Stuff like that. So I did a lot of things with him.
Yeah, I just remember a lot of him sitting around the table with Dad and Mom and whoever, just telling stories and laugh. He laughed a lot.
He did.
Yeah. And liked his cigars.
Well, to go on to your thing when you were in college, when Trevor went up there to college, Trevor's my son. Yeah, I took him, his roommate that we just met, and Chris, who's 4 years younger than Trevor, so he'd have been about 14. And we went over and got Grandpa and went out in the middle of the courtyard at the nursing home and had a cigar together.
Yeah.
Now, do you think your cousins are going to forget ever having a cigar
of course
with their
not.
great-grandfather?
Right.
So
and that must have been pretty soon before he passed, I would imagine, a year or two.
It had to be within a year or two. But he was a machinist for 47 years.
Yeah.
Worked on only 2 machines in his whole career. And was quite pissed when I left the one company after 7.5 years. What you did was you stayed with the company.
Right.
And the company was loyal to you and you were loyal to them.
Well, that doesn't happen anymore.
No. But then when Nina passed, his brother, who was a war hero, a real war hero.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
Aim was a real funny guy. The stuff he would come out with, and he could get away with saying, you look at me, and when you see me at different things, functions, I'm probably similar to what he was like.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out is why you're the way you are.
He could get away with saying things that nobody else could get away with saying.
Yeah.
He was, from what I understand, a real tough guy. And he wasn't very big, but he'd been known to punch out a captain, and he got promoted real quick because he thought nothing of looking up to authority.
Right.
But
what branch was he in? Was he in the Army?
He was in the Army. Yeah. He had I think a Bronze Star, Purple Heart.
And he was in World War II.
World War II. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he was crazy. He was a lot of fun to be around. And just like I said, he could get away with stuff that nobody else could
Yeah.
in the family.
And he was Pop's only brother?
Only brother, yeah.
Only sibling at all?
No, there was Aunt Bessie. I'm not sure how all of it fit together.
Yeah.
The only thing I did know that was, let's see, Walter's brother married Nina's sister. So
Wait.
Uncle Frank and Aunt Annie Aunt Annie was Nina's sister, and Uncle Frank was Walter's brother.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't even know if you
And
know
she
that
was-
part of the story.
No, I don't know that.
Okay, yeah.
So she was also from Canada,
Mhm.
from Quebec?
And so was Uncle Lorgy, Uncle Eddie, a couple others that we really didn't associate around a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's talk about a little bit, as you're starting to get older, you're a teenager now and you're in high school, and what was that like? You went to the LaSalle High School?
Well, I started out over in LaSalle, and then I transferred over. We moved over to, Teresa and Walter moved to Florida, and they had a trailer out right on a little lake. So when they left, Mom and Dad got their house on Packard Road.
Right.
And before they left, Walter had a booth at Page's that was his booth. So he could sit there and drink his beer and watch the house. And it was pretty much reserved for him.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. He also had in the house that you saw him on a lounge chair, but he had a stool between the cupboard and the stove. And he would sit there and drink his little Welch's glass of beer. It was Iroquois beer. And every once in a while, he'd get up and he'd walk over to the refrigerator, grab a couple eggs, break them into the beer, and drink them down.
God. So what was high school like for you? What was it?
I did well up in middle school. I was in math class. I was a teacher's pet because I aced everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, I, being a smart ass, got brought up in front of the class, and my favorite teacher bent me over with a meter stick. From there on, my grades just went downhill. I mean, I just went to shit.
It didn't work. It didn't turn you the other way and make you a straight arrow?
No, really just the opposite. No, it really was.
Wow.
In fact, in high school, or in middle school, or junior high school, we used to call it, one time I was at the vice principal's office, bent over with a meter stick coming at my ass, right?
Jesus.
Years later, when I married your Aunt Beth, my second wife, the mayor of Niagara Falls was the one that married us. It was the vice president of principal of the.
Did you remind him?
I probably, knowing me, I probably did. Yeah. So anyway, we ended up moving from LaSalle over there into the house there. So I went from 9th grade in high school to 10th grade out in Wheatfield.
Oh, okay. So you graduated from Niagara Wheatfield High School.
I graduated from Wheatfield in '67.
Okay. And after you graduated, is that when Dad and the rest of the family moved to Florida?
I graduated in June, the 28th, I think, of June. I went in the Marine Corps in the 10th, and I spent about a week with Ray and Millie because Mom and Dad moved to Florida because Teresa and Walter had passed, and they inherited the trailer down there.
Oh, okay.
So that's when your dad and Uncle Denny moved down there.
So Dad
and by that time, the girls were born, too. Harriet was born when I was a junior in high school, and Melda was born when I was a senior.
Wow. So you really didn't get to spend any of their childhoods, the early childhoods with them at all?
No, other than Mom made sure that you learned how to change diapers and do that stuff. I mean, like I said, she was a good mentor. So when my kids came around, all that stuff just came natural.
How close were you with Dad and Uncle Dennis?
Not very.
Yeah.
Because I always was off doing something. I couldn't sit still. And they were pretty close in age. And when they moved to Florida, they were the only two that they knew. So they got even closer.
So they were 13, 14, I guess, when you graduated?
Yeah, because Dennis was probably, I think, about 4 years younger than me. And your dad was another year.
Let's talk about when you enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide that you wanted to enlist?
Because there was no way in hell I was going to college because I wasn't ready for it. Even though by that time I picked my grades back up and stuff like that. If I had something I wanted to do, like I worked in high school. In order to get a work permit, you had to carry at least a B average.
Oh.
So guess what? My grades went up to B average.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at a department store.
Now in '67, the Vietnam conflict was already going on, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you knew about it when you enlisted.
I knew about it, but when you're that age, you really don't pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah.
What I knew is I was from small town. My dad wasn't in the service. My grandfather wasn't in the service. Only Uncle Aim was in the service. Being a small town, everybody was God, apple pie, and the flag. When I got out, I decided, well, what am I going to do? I don't want to move to Florida with them, and I need to go someplace, and it ain't going to be college. So the military seemed like the right place to go.
What did you think? I'm going to join and I'm going to go to war, or did you think I'm just going to join and see where this goes?
Yeah, pretty much that. Well, actually, I hate to even admit this, but I tried to enlist in the Air Force.
Yeah.
In Niagara Falls.
Uh-huh.
And they had one recruiter, and they were taking all the guys that were getting their draft notices. So being the industrious guy that I was, I went up to Buffalo where they had 5 recruiters, and they were taking all the guys that were draft dodgers. So I was pissed off. I walked out of the door, and I walked past a Navy recruiter, and I go, nah, I don't think so.
So what you're saying is these guys have been drafted into the Marines or the Army?
Army.
And they didn't want to go, so they went to the Air Force.
Yeah, because they were all afraid to go to Vietnam.
Did the Air Force not go to Vietnam?
Not in the capacity of like the Army or the Marines. So then I walked into the Marine Corps door, and there was a big top sergeant in there doing some paperwork, and I was 127 pounds soaking wet.
Mm-hmm.
And
you were 17, 18?
I was 17.
17.
And I walked in the door, and I says, what can you do for me? And he looks up at me and looks back down and just ignored me. And I said, no, I'm serious. What can you do for me? And he said, well, we talked about it. He said, well, I can give you aviation guaranteed if you pass the test and everything. And I was pretty good in electronics. So I said, okay, let's go for it. So I came home, signed all the papers, had to have Grandma sign them. So I walked in the door, and I couldn't think of the Marine Corps hymn, and I was whistling Anchors Away. And she said, you joined the Navy? I said, no. So, she was very supportive, signed the papers, and I went in a delayed program because I was still in high school.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I get out 2 weeks later, I was standing on the yellow footprints at Paris Island.
Wow. Just like a whirlwind.
Yeah, you might say it might have been almost like a nightmare. Well, the way they did it, it was we'd take a train down to Beaufort, and then they get you on a bus, and they take you into Paris Island. Well, by this time, you've been up 36, 48 hours straight. Yeah. You get in there 2 a.m. Now, you don't know anything about this place. Well, I didn't anyway, and you go across this causeway with all this Spanish moss hanging down. You've heard all these stories about guys marching into the swamp and drowning, which did happen. It was an eye-opening experience. And the bus comes up and stops, and all of a sudden these people are just yelling and screaming and, making everything go crazy.
Wow.
And so you go out there and you stand on the yellow footprints, front to back and side to side. And that's where you stand until they get you motivated, let's say.
Uh-huh.
And, and then they go in and they buzz your head and shave you down. There's, nothing there. It's like, do you have any moles or any scars? Yes. Yeah. So what? They just go over it. It was crazy. And you're still up. You still haven't slept. And, they start processing you and throwing gear at you and everything else. And the funniest part was the first time you go through the chow line, they give you a metal tray. They tell you, and everybody's still yelling, it's stick it out if you want it. Okay. So you stick the tray out where the guy's serving the food, if you wanted it. And if not, you pull it back to you. Well, you just walk through the line. You're just hungry, right? So they put some nice eggs on my plate. They put some nice bacon. They put some nice toast. And then they put this white shit all over my toast. And we called it shit on a shingle.
Uh-huh.
And you can't leave anything on your tray.
Oh, so, you got to eat it all?
I choked that one down.
Wow.
The next day, guess what? I did not stick the tray out anymore.
Oh, God.
But about the third day I was going through, I'm in line, and you're like a zombie. You're not oriented and whatever. I get to the one guy, and he goes, Harrington, and I look up, and it's a kid I grew up with over in LaSalle.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I saw him just before he graduated. He had orders to Vietnam. But, so they finally get you into bed and everything. And the next thing you know, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and somebody's got a billy club beating on a garbage can and screaming, throwing them down the middle of the aisle and stuff like that. Well, what their objective is to break you down mentally and then build you up to their way of thinking. Because when you're in a combat situation, you can't think.
Right.
You have to react. So it was the physical part of it. Even though I was little, I was very strong, so I could outdo most of the guys that were there. So I didn't have a problem with boot camp.
Wow.
I know, I really didn't. I mean,
Well, how long did it take for you to get broken down before you could get built back up? Or were you?
for me, probably not as bad as some people, because I enlisted. I wanted the discipline and the military and stuff like that.
So you were in there with a bunch of people that were drafted.
No, Marines were not drafted, except when I got up to Buffalo to do my swearing in. They have everybody in a big room, and they say, okay, everybody in the Air Force, go out that door. Everybody in the Navy, go out that door. Marines up against that wall. Army, line up. Count off by fours. All the number ones take one step forward. All the twos through fours make a right-hand turn and exit that door. When the door closed, they said, all you number ones, you just enlisted, you just volunteered for the Marine Corps, because the Marines needed people.
Oh, wow.
So there was a lot of crying going on. On our side, we were kind of chuckling because, we had enlisted.
Yeah.
And these guys were hoping to be in the Army, and it was not
Wow.
pretty.
Other than that one guy that you recognized in boot camp that you went to high school with, were you in boot camp with anybody else that you knew?
They had a buddy system, and I had met a guy up in Buffalo, and we went in together.
Yeah.
We went through boot camp together, and I never saw him until we got into the squadrons later on.
Okay.
Now, the one other funny one was a guy on the train. He was a little bit older. A lot of us were younger, 17, 18. He was probably about 25. He was probably 225, 250 pounds. And on the train on the way down, he's drinking beer and eating everything in the world. And he says, they'll straighten my ass right out. Okay. So they dropped him after we got there, probably in the first week, to what they called fat body platoon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you couldn't say that now, but that's what they called it.
Uh-huh.
So he got dropped, and, we never thought much of it and went through our training and stuff like that. There was a lot of physical stuff. And anyway, so we're in the last week. We've already got our orders, and this guy comes up to us in the cafeteria, in the mess hall. He says, how you guys doing? Okay. He goes, you don't remember me, do you? No. He had gone from 225, 250 to 180 pounds.
Yeah.
In fat body platoon, and he was graduating like 2 weeks after us. His own mother wouldn't have known him.
Wow.
It was incredible what they did to this kid.
Wow.
And that's what he wanted to happen. Boot camp had its interesting moments.
What is boot camp? Is it 8 weeks, 12 weeks, less?
I was there for 14. They didn't actually start our training, I don't think, till a week or so after we got there.
Oh.
And I think at the time it was like 12 weeks.
Wow.
I remember that we lost drill competition and at the time the senior drill instructor didn't know by what. It was a half a point, but my bunkmate was the one that was out of step, and the senior drill instructor walked over to him, and we're all standing at attention, eyes straight forward, and he reached out with his left hand, and he grabbed him by the throat, and he picked him up in the air, and all I could see is the guy's feet go. Never laid a hand on him, but just picked him up. I was going, oh, shit.
Wow. Was it like Full Metal Jacket?
It was, exactly.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, even, definitely. The cadence that they used, everything, it was definitely Full Metal Jacket. There was no question.
Did anybody just couldn't hack it, had a mental breakdown?
We had one guy that he decided to turn in the senior drill instructor. The way it was kind of structured is the assistant drill instructors were the bad guys. The senior was kind of a bad guy, but more your mentor.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So this guy turned in the senior drill instructor for something, which he didn't do, but he was suspended until the investigation. They walked in with this kid with 2 military police and not to do anything except protect him from the rest of us. The thing like the blanket party, yes, those
Hold
did
him-
happen.
Hold him down and
You hold him down, and yeah, not with him but I did see that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because if somebody's not pulling their weight, then the whole
Yep.
group of you.
But see, that's changed. When your cousin went in, Chris, my son, they weren't allowed to touch you. So what they would do instead is they would take, and if there was a shitbird, as we called them, they would take him out to the pits. Now, Paris Island in the middle of summer is 98 degrees and humid and sand flies and gnats and all that stuff. And they would exercise them in the pits.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the drill instructor had to go to the PX for 10 minutes. All of a sudden, the shitbird got changed.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it. Well, how long after you finished boot camp did you get your orders right away as soon as you graduated?
We got our orders with 3 weeks left. Guys were getting orders to Vietnam,
Yeah.
0311s, grunts. I got my orders, and the senior drill instructor looks at me and goes, Jacksonville, Florida, tech school. I says, yes, sir, that's because I'm a lover, not a fighter. Well, when I was in with the original, the original guy, he told me as I walked out the door, if you have your shit together really good, you can actually make PFC at a boot camp. 10% can make PFC at a boot camp.
Uh-huh.
Well, to me, that's cha-ching, more money
Right.
and more a stripe. I did make PFC at a boot camp. I just had a really bad attitude. So then we went down to tech school. And
what were you learning? What was to learn?
I was
aviation?
an aircraft electrical systems technician.
Okay.
And so we learned electrical systems and stuff like that. And that tech school was kind of wild because, it was one of those things, in college, they don't tell you this, but if you get tired, don't fall asleep in my class. Stand up. You know how easy it is to sleep standing up? You can do it. I remember one class, this guy fell asleep, and the instructor had a little aircraft part, and he threw it at his head across the whole room, put a hole in the wall behind him. I mean, so it didn't stop in boot camp. You know what I'm saying?
How long were you there down in tech school?
I think I was in tech school about 6 months. But out of boot camp, at the time, they took you right into advanced infantry training, which is up in Camp Lejeune. So you're out in the field, you're working with live ammo, you're working with hand grenades, you're shooting M60 machine guns, you're doing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
You're learning about C4 and how to blow it up and what it won't do and what it will do and stuff like that. So you went to different ranges on different days. You did hell of a lot of marching with packs and rifles.
So you did that before you went to tech school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was right out of boot camp before you got
Yeah.
leave. In fact, 2 funny stories about that. One was you were not allowed to have radio. Okay. I'm a little naive kid from upstate New York. I can hear this really, really good music going on. So I walk down to the end of where the squad bay was, and I look over, and there's these black guys standing around a 55-gallon drum. And they were all from New York, and they were singing doo-wop. And it was like Duke of Earl. I'll never forget it. It was so beautiful. It was like, I'm going, where's the music? And it was just these guys singing.
wow.
It was like, it was really great. The other one was, I was smoking at the time. And the instructor said, look, we'll make you a deal. We can have the smoking lamp lit the whole time you're here at advanced infantry training if you smoke a cigarette while you're in the gas chamber. Well, I did, which,
How is that possible?
Because attitude. I mean, most guys were running out just alone. There was a few of us that made it.
So did you?
Of course, but here's the catch. The next day we had different instructors, and they hadn't made the deal with us. So they had different rules. So up at then I went from there up to Beaufort, where we worked in the squadron, and I worked in the intermediate maintenance level.
Beaufort,
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay.
Yeah, it was a Marine Corps Air Station up there, which is just around the corner from Paris Island, by the way.
Uh-huh.
But then you're out, and it's a whole different world, So you're doing a job, you're working on, equipment, you're learning and things like that. So that was pretty interesting. working on all the aircraft.
So when did you get to ship out overseas?
Well, I'd been there for a while, and then we had we would do what they call TAD, temporary assigned duty, and we would go to different places. Like we went out to Yuma, Arizona. We got out to Yuma, Arizona for I don't know 2 or 6 weeks. I can't remember now. And when I got back, I had my orders to Nam.
What'd you think when you got those? It was just like, well, it's inevitable. It was going to happen at some point.
It's going to happen, yeah. I was kind of shocked. I wasn't expecting it, but I was expecting it,
Right. Well, what did you think you were going into? Did you think you were?
Did you know
what
you don't know what you're
into?
really going into over there? Even when you get there, because I see a lot of the movies now, and I see these guys that were down in Saigon, and that a big city. When I landed in Da Nang. Well, actually, on the way over there, we stopped in Okinawa. I spent Christmas of '69 in Okinawa. I have never seen so many hungover people in my life as Christmas Day in Okinawa because they were all headed in country. So I got in country in Da Nang. A lot of it's a blur. I just, it didn't really mean anything. It just, you knew you were going. It didn't know what to expect, whatever. So I get into Da Nang. I was in Da Nang about 2 hours. Now, I don't know how big this place is. I don't know what it looks like. I understand it's a beautiful city now. But anyway, so 2 hours later, I'm in Chu Lai. I don't remember landing there. I don't remember too much about it, but checking into where I had to check into. And the one guy that was there, I knew from Buford. So he got me in his hooch with him. But,
So the only person that you knew there was the one guy?
It ended up there were a couple guys that came in during while I was there. And we tried to get them all in our hooch together. And over there, it was a shop. And, the difference was sometimes they would throw rockets at you. But
I remember seeing a picture of you standing in a crater. I think it was you were standing in a crater or next to a crater or something where
full metal jacket, M16 in hand, and basically what had happened was we were doing inside perimeter duty around our avionics complex, around our hangars, around our planes, and I was in a bunker. And it was the first night, and it was boring. So basically, what I said was my buddy was the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge. In other words, like fire watch. So if people needed wake-up calls or he made sure things were okay at night. So he was standing duty at night. I said to him, look, I get off at 3 o'clock. Wake me up at 6 if you can, and I'll go into the shop and see if there's any work. And if not, I'll go back to bed because, it's one hell of a lot to do. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, right? So about 5 minutes to 6, all of a sudden, it sounded like a war going off. I could hear, whoo, whoo, and they were dropping rockets on us right and left, right? So I said, oh, hell, I got to get to the bunker. So I'm running like hell to the bunker. And I realized I hadn't got out of bed yet. just run, because to be woken up like that with 3 hours sleep, I was like, you're in a zombie state anyway.
Yeah.
And
was this was your first experience with actual people shooting at you?
No, it wasn't. But with that many coming in at once, I mean, it sounded like a war movie. Whereas before they tossed stuff at us and stuff like that. The night I got there, the firing of the outside perimeter opened up with firing. And I just said, I'm going to sleep. I just went to sleep. And then, so the next day, I'm out in this bunker, and we're sitting there for 3 hours, and nothing's really going on. And I walk back through the shop, and all of a sudden they started dropping them on us again. So that rocket hit that day right in front of the bunker I was at. So had I been there 5 minutes, had I not left when I did, I would have been right there. Wow. So that was a bunker right in front of my hole. That's why you have that picture of me.
Wow.
And they hit one. I watched it hit one of the hooches where 6 guys were sleeping. Fortunately, what happened is a 122 rocket blows backwards. So it hit the front of the hooch and it blew up backwards. So it didn't kill any of the guys in there. It destroyed the hooch. I talked to a guy a couple years later still pulling splinters out of his legs. If our sergeant major had been sitting in his chair, the backblast would have cut him in half. They took him out of country 2 days later. He went off the deep end.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They blew up our one road. But you'd go to lunch, come back, and there'd be a train of carts behind a 6x with 1,500 or 2,000 pound bombs on them, just while right in front of you. and they'd be loading up to go out there and dump on the VC.
So how long were you there at that place?
I was in Chu Lai till September, and they sent us up to Iwakuni, Japan.
Okay.
But we always said the safest place in Vietnam was on the shitter because nobody ever blew up the shitters. It's really true, you know. I got a 6x driver's license when I was over there for something to do.
What's that?
6x is one of those big
The
trucks
big
you
trucks?
see. Yeah, one of the big trucks.
Okay.
And I got my driver's license, and this captain wanted to go out to Ville. So I said, okay, fine. You've heard about Highway 1 in Vietnam. Well, I was driving down Highway 1, taking pictures all the way because most of the time I was on the base. And we got out to this place, and you and I wouldn't consider it a campsite. So I'm hanging out there, and I don't even know where he's at anymore. And so I got out there and did that, and nothing happened big time there. But it was kind of funny to see the difference, especially when you see the movies like Guys Down in Saigon. There was a city. We were really more up in the country.
Oh.
In fact, if you Google Chu Lai right now, you'll see 2 pieces of concrete, and that's it.
Really?
Yeah, it's all gone.
What'd you do when you got to Japan?
I got there, and me and another sergeant from another squadron down in Vietnam checked in, and our NCORC, our boss, the staff or gunny sergeant in charge of us, his name was Staff Sergeant Smith. And Staff Sergeant Smith was a fire plug. He was a black guy and built like a fire plug, like Marcel Dion of the old L.A. Kings, right? So we get in there, and he says, look, when my planes are not flying, all I better see is your butt working on them. When my planes are flying, I don't want to see your face. Well, the story about him was they were doing a lot of handshaking and stuff like that over in Vietnam. And him and another black sergeant were standing in line. And these 2 guys wanted to come up and play patty cake, slapping the hands and stuff like that. And they were in the lunch line. He said, no, please leave us alone. And the guys persisted. So he turned around and he took 2 swings, knocked both of them out cold. He was the 1959 All-Marine boxing champion. But, it was like, that was kind of interesting because there were red areas of Iwakuni, and that's where the communists were. And the other thing, on the other side of our fence was a crematorium. So when they were burning bodies, it was horrible.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So how long were you there?
About 2.5 months, I think.
And then what?
But I did everything. I mean, I went to Hiroshima. I went to the different places and saw different things and rode the bullet train. I rode the bullet train one time for 8 hours to get to a town with a friend that I met over there. And
this is while you were in?
this is while I was in, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because you had weekends, you still,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was like a job and stuff like that. And I tried all the foods in the world.
Were you keeping up with what was happening over in Vietnam?
It-
With news-wise?
No,
No.
because it didn't really matter. I did my job when I was there. I did what I had to do when I was there. We actually I went to the Philippines as an aircrew member. We went there for a couple days, and the one friend had a girlfriend up in town. So we went up in town. There were some restricted places we weren't supposed to go, which is where his girlfriend lives. So we walked up the street, past a couple Filipino gangs, thinking we were tough guys, right? I'm surprised we even came back alive, but and his girlfriend wasn't home that night. So we went back to the bars drinking. But yeah, we did some real crazy things that could have got us killed.
So is that it? Did you get out after that?
No, I got back to the States, and people were getting out with 6 months, 2 years left. I had a critical job classification, so they let me out 2 days early, convenience of the government. They let me out on a Friday instead of a Sunday. But I was the flight line avionics chief. So everything that was the hydraulic shop, the anything electrical was under me. So like when they set up the identification codes, IFF codes or stuff like that. But some of the pilots, you wonder how they became pilots. We had what we call a bitch sheet, a yellow sheet, and when the pilot would fly the plane, he would come back and he'd write up the sheet. What's wrong? And we had one pilot write up the IFF does not work in the OFF position. The worst one I had was the one pilot kept telling me that the gyro was bad. And we'd check it out. It was fine. Next day, come back. The gyro is bad. Okay, check it out again. No problem. Third day, he wrote it up. I took it inside, and because I knew how to work the benches inside, I tested it inside on the bench, put it back in the plane. The next morning, the pilot's standing at my door waiting to talk to me. He said to me, he says, the gyro's bad. I said, sir, I personally tested this out on the bench. It passes all naval specifications. He says, do you want to explain to me why when I get up in the air and I hit the autopilot system, the plane does a complete flip over? I said, sir, this thing will never see a light of day again. Oh, I mean, the stuff we had to do, the stuff we buried over in Vietnam and stuff. Oh, yeah. We're sitting there one day in the middle of lunch, and they started dropping rockets in on us.
What do you do when that happens?
You duck to the floor.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. It's kind of hard to shoot at a rocket. It's not something you can fight back with.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just.
So when did you end up coming back to the States?
I think it was before Christmas of 70. Yeah, I think it was before Christmas, because then I got out in July of 71.
So you still had that year left.
I still had that 6 months left to do.
And where did you do
that? They
that?
offered me $12,000 to re-enlist, and I wanted the extra stripe, and they wouldn't give it to me, so I got out.
Oh. Did you go then to Niagara Falls again? Go back to the Falls?
Went back to the Falls. Yeah, we went back to the Falls, and everybody said, "Oh, you're not going to get any jobs." And I had 3 jobs within 2 weeks. The third job, I was driving up Alt Boulevard on Grand Island, and I was going up to a company up there, and there were only 2 companies on the whole street. And this guy was walking up the street, so I stopped and said, "Hey, you want a ride?" And he said, "Yeah." So I gave him a ride, and he was an older guy. Of course, I'm still young at the time.
Yeah.
And
that's also back when you gave people rides on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really and truly. He was a janitor at this place. He says, "Well, what are you doing?" I'm going up there putting an application in up here. Oh, why don't you put one in here? I says, "Well, what do they do?" And so I went in, put the application in, and got a call 2 days later, and hired on there as a quality control guy. And then I stayed there for 7 or 8 years, and that's when I met Aunt Beth.
And where was the rest of the family at this time when you got out in the 70s, I guess?
They came back because both Harriet and Imelda were allergic to citrus, and they were in the middle of citrus area. Yeah, so they had to come back.
They're allergic to citrus?
They were allergic to citrus. So when the orange blossoms came in, and you're in the middle of the state, and that's all that's there, you know.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh yeah.
Are they still allergic to?
Yeah.
Are they still allergic to citrus?
Don't know.
Wow. So it's not the citrus. It's not like eating an orange. It's the blossoms,
it's the pollens and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about I guess about this time when they all got back, because I don't really know a lot about Uncle Dennis. Because like we said, he passed in 1990. So what was it? Do you know were you around when he was a teenager? And I heard he had it out a couple of times with Grandpa.
He probably did. I wasn't there because they had moved. When I got out of high school, I never went back home. You know, I mean, never know, to the house to live with them or anything.
Right.
I did go visit when I got out of boot camp when they were down in Florida. But yeah, Uncle Dennis was, kind of like your dad, pretty independent. Your dad and him were real close.
Yeah.
I know he had his girlfriends and stuff like that. I thought he was going to marry one down the street, never did. And then somewhere along the line, he got his own house and had a couple move in, and he decided that he was of the other persuasion. Then he got tired of stuff, and he just left his house, just walked away from it, and left a couple in there and hitchhiked to Florida.
How old was he then?
I would say somewhere in his 20s.
Oh.
Yeah. He wasn't a kid.
Oh. For some reason, I thought he got kicked out of the house when he was, or was that
he
my
might
dad?
have.
Or was that my dad?
Yeah. Well, your dad, got into a Grandpa, and he ended up spending a winter in the equipment shed down at the park.
That was my dad.
That was your dad. Yeah.
Why did I think that was you?
No, that was your dad.
Okay.
No, when I left, just left. I was gone.
What did they get into it about?
Hard to say. Dad would go off for different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your dad and him didn't get along. Like I said, I don't think he got along with any of us. He got along with the girls.
Yeah.
When they came along, but he didn't really get along. He was pretty much to himself, and in fact, I read some letters after he passed that he had written to my mother, And I wondered who it was that had written the letters.
Really?
Yeah.
What years were
This
was
was-
when they were dating?
This
or
must
young?
have been when they were younger,
Yeah.
when they first married and whatever.
Did you get closer with my dad and with Uncle Dennis as time went on and everybody started growing up a little bit?
And the one I really got closest with was Imelda,
Yeah.
the youngest one. And let's see, I was a senior in high school, so I was 17 when she was born. And we got pretty close together. But your dad and grandpa, it's like, like I said, your grandfather loved his farm. He loved this stuff. And he was always into the machinery and stuff like that. And
Right.
the one time out there at your dad's farm, your dad ran his rototiller out of gas, and that really sparked a big.
I kind of remember that a
Yeah.
little bit because I just remember my mom being upset about it. I don't know if I remember. I kind of remember Grandpa yelling at him
Yeah.
about something, which was kind of weird.
I remember when, Beth and I would go over to the house with the kids, and he would sit in his chair and never say a word 4 hours.
That's kind of that's how I remember him.
Yeah.
Until he had a stroke.
Till he had his stroke. Yeah. How what that did to him, I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I remember.
And then all he would do is talk, but you couldn't understand him. And he'd laugh like hell,
Right.
But the thing was, for a guy who had a stroke, because he was in maintenance all the time and walked around the plant, they would find him 5 miles out in the middle of the country and pick him up. And he had his little tag on, and they would call Melda because her name was on the tag. And she'd say, "Is he doing anything wrong? No. Is he hurting anybody? No." Then what's the problem? Why are you picking him up?
Just 'cause
he
he's
would
out
just
here.
walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, once he had a stroke, he was like, he became a nice guy again.
Well, he became something.
Well, yeah. But I never saw it,
Yeah.
and they loved to camp too. I mean, they would go camping and fishing and all that stuff. And I was never a fisherman. Your dad and Denny were fishermen.
No,
but,
I remember their little spot on, what was it called? Willow Beach or Willow Lake or something.
Yeah, but we would go up to Thousand Islands. I still remember going up there and stuff,
Yeah. I remember they had a little camper or a trailer on
Mhm.
Willow Beach, which is not too far from where my parents live,
Right,
just up
yeah.
the street. And I remember being a kid, spending the night there a couple of times when I would fish. And I remember Grandma was really nice. I don't really remember him too much that time.
He didn't really relate a lot.
Yeah.
But yet at his funeral, people from work loved him.
Yeah.
The only ones that saw it our way were the family. Because even like his sisters and all that stuff, he was a different person. So I don't know. I never got it.
Yeah.
Never understood it.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. Let's see. What else did you want?
You feel good?
I feel great.
Okay.
I feel sore and I'm tired. And of course, that was 14 hours at the election.
Yeah. So you did your duty yesterday. Yesterday was election day here in Virginia, and you worked. You volunteer your time at the polls.
I'm actually the chief, so I run the precinct.
Yeah. So are you in charge of delivering all of the results to the state board of elections or wherever you got to deliver them to?
Well, we do that. That is done over a computer. So we run the tapes out of the voting machines, and then we have to report them right away. But then we have to put all the tapes and all the ballots and all that stuff into certain packages, seal them, sign them by everybody, and take them down to the county. The nice thing is,
so when you're not
we
playing
have
golf,
a great precinct.
Yeah.
And it's when on an election like this, you have over 50%. That's a good turnout.
Yeah.
And yes, I do play a lot of golf. I do enjoy riding the Harley. And I'll be doing the colors down at the War Memorial on Monday.
So you're still involved. You're still involved. Yeah.
And actually, your cousin is going to be the left rifleman,
Chris.
Yeah.
So he served in the Iraq War. What year was that?
Operation Iraqi Freedom.
In 2003-ish.
He was in from 01 to 05.
01 to 05. Yeah, I remember when he joined.
And Jill was in 96.
Yes, your daughter Jill joined in 96. The Marine Corps.
Yep.
But I remember when I moved down here to Richmond in late 2000. So it was 2001 that Chris graduated high school.
Yeah. No, it would have been 2000 because then
he graduated in 2000.
He took a year off before he went in.
Because I remember hanging out with Chris that year before he went in.
Yeah.
Well, September 11th happened. Was that before or after he joined? That must have been after. I feel like he went in the summertime.
Yeah, he went in the summer. He went in. He wanted to see Trevor graduate from college, and he pushed his delay off till just after he graduated from college.
Okay, so he went in probably early summer.
Yep.
Because I remember talking to him about it.
Yeah.
And I remember we were sitting down at Taylor's or someplace, and he was like, the odds that there's going to be a war. And then 9/11 happened.
Yeah. He was in Iraq. In fact, one of the things he did was he when it was his wife's birthday, he wrote "Happy Birthday, Gina" on the side of a 2,000-pound bomb that got dropped on Iraq that night.
Yeah, he worked on an aircraft carrier, right?
He worked on Harriers on the aircraft carrier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In fact, actually, he ran across the book with that plane on it, with that bomb on it.
In a book?
In a book, yeah.
He saw
and other people have recognized that he bought the book. Yeah, he's got the book with that plane, with that bomb on it. Yeah.
What does he think? I guess I could probably just ask him, but before he joined, like, he didn't know what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he didn't know if he wanted to go to school or what. And
right.
He was kind of just running around town here.
He made a decision that his friends were going to wear one uniform, and he didn't want to be in that uniform.
Right.
So he wore the other one.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
I've been very blessed with kids who are,
No, you have definitely been. And
I'm very fortunate. I have a nephew with a beautiful wife and some nice kids. I might not get along with the nephew, but
we get along all right.
Well, we're Bills fans. We have to.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you over the holidays.
Yes, you will, I'm sure. Yeah, we got to see those little kitties of yours.
All right. Well, there you go. That's my Uncle Clint. That's him. And I got to tell you, 41 years knowing that guy, by far the most subdued I have ever heard him or seen him. I think the microphone in his face may have calmed him down a little bit. But if you've ever been to a wedding with my family, if you've ever been to a holiday celebration, if you've ever had Christmas Eve over at his house, if you've seen him up at Watkins Glen, New York, watching the race, my Uncle Clint is quite a talker and quite an instigator. He likes to push buttons. To be honest with you, he and I do not see eye to eye on politics at all. I mean, as far as you can get away from each other, we are. I'm glad that we can sit down and we can talk and we can have these conversations and we love each other just like families do. So if you've got your own Uncle Clint in your own family, remember that we're all human. We're all part of the human race. We all have different experiences. We all have different perspectives, and it's just all about sitting down with each other and just making that human connection and remembering you're all cut from the same cloth, so to speak. All right. Remember, if you got a story you want to tell, make sure you email me at caughtbyhappy@gmail.com. I'd love to hear it. Love to get you on the podcast if we can. Love to do a Skype session with you, or you can come over to my house and we can eat a sandwich together and talk, but now with our mouths full. All right, bye, everybody. Have a good one. Caught by Happy is a production of Harrington Communications Consultants. If you need anything in the way of strategic communications or public relations or content marketing or social media, hit us up, harringtoncc.net, and we'll get you straight